Perfect. Okay. So I am the project director for the Texas Alliance for Water Conservation. We are based at Texas Tech University. I work closely with Krishna. I don't know how many of you know Krishna and work with him, but he it works at a very fast paced speed, and so he's been great to add to our team. He's been with the team for a couple of years now. I have been with the TAWC project for, I guess nearly 15 years now, working with our producers and our team. Rick Kellison here on the screen was the project director at the initiation of this and recently retired last year. Before I was the project director, I was the communications and outreach director. And outreach and education is what TAWC is primarily about. We are about 50-50 research and outreach. And so the rest of our team here, you can see we're very diverse. We pull from all legs of the College of Ag here at Tech. We have economists, public relations. We have a producer relations manager. And if any of you start a project like this, I highly recommend having a producer relations manager. And Jeff Pate he's been very involved in agriculture. So he had no ties to the university, but he has worked um, as a FFA advisor, as a agriculture uh, chemical and fertilizer rep, and as a agriculture loan officer at a bank. So he had lots of ties to producers in our area and was very knowledgeable of production in our area. And so he was very key in getting our producer network started. And he's still with us. Um, Again, we have a really large and great team, and this is all of them, and most of them have been with us for I guess at least 5 years, if not 15. So let me just kind of get into, and y'all just stop me and ask questions. I want this to be very conversational as we go as well. But this is our area. So we started in just two counties, which is over on the left-hand side of your screen there. And so Hale and Floyd counties was where the project originally started in 2005. And the project was started by Senator Robert Duncan. And he just knew that in the South Plains of Texas, High Plains of Texas, water was becoming very scarce and was going to soon be the greatest commodity in that area because of how fast it was running out. Irrigated agriculture is huge in this area. It's the primary uh, job force, economic force in this area. And so Senator Robert Duncan started this project. It got funded by the Texas Water Development Board, and that is who our primary funding continues to come from. So we started in Hill and Floyd County, and then it expanded a little bit over the years. And now then, we are in the center section in all of those counties. So we go from Sherman, which is at the top of the Texas Panhandle, down to Glasscock County. That all these counties have very different water amounts, water qualities, soil composition, and farming focuses. So you get in Sherman and Moore County, you have pretty good water wells up there. You have water wells that are still pumping 500 gallons a minute. You get down to Martin and Glasscock County, and you get into very limited water. Martin County, I would say, is 90%, if not more, dry land row cropping. So most of those farmers have to rely on rainfall because there is just very, very little irrigation in that area. Um, Martin County also has very sandy soil. So there have been producers in Martin County that have put in drip irrigation and have had to abandon it because they learned that their soil was actually too sandy, that they could never, without the right amount of rainfall, they could never get that drip to water up to the top of the soil profile. It would just fall straight down through that soil and that sandy soil. So that's something pretty interesting that we didn't learn, but the producers unfortunately had to learn at their own cost, was where drip irrigation doesn't work. We do have drip irrigation on some of our sites, and I'll get into that a little bit more. Over here on the right hand side, that is kind of a new project that Krishna has going on that we're going to get into in 2025. So we're going to be expanding it into even more counties. So right now we have about 45 field sites and about 30 producers that we work with. Again, most of our funding comes from the Texas Water Development Board. And then we also got some Climate Smart funding for the Climate Smart Commodities grants. As y'all were talking about earlier, as far as I know, those are secure, but I guess we're kind of waiting to hear. And I don't know if you all may know more about that than I talked to Krishna about it yesterday, and he said to carry on as usual. But we did get a $5 million grant for the Climate Smart Commodities that we're working with a sorghum cotton rotation with about 30 different field sites on that. That's just a little bit more. And then these are our the technologies that we work with. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with these technologies, but they're installed on field sites. We have Goanna, which is a soil moisture probe. It can measure down to about 3 feet in the field, the soil moisture profile. AquaSpy is about the same. And then Arable is new. It's out of California, and it's what the National Sorghum Association is using for their Climate Smart grant. So we have that installed on sorghum fields. It's like I said, this is our second year of installing and using Arable, so it's still pretty new to us. But the autonomous pivot in the upper right-hand corner, that's the one that we have been very impressed with. It has to be installed on a pivot. It can't be installed on drip irrigation because it's actually on the pivot. It doesn't go in the soil at all. But the unique thing about this, and I'll get into it a little bit more later, but it takes a whole field reading to where your soil moisture probes, and I'll go with Goanna on this one, because Goanna has some very unique and awesome readings that we really like. However, it is right there in that point of the field. So if you have different elevations in your field, different soil types, that's only taking a reading in that one particular spot. Autonomous pivot is going all the way around your circle and taking a reading all the way around. So it's very unique in that way. On the right-hand side on the map, this is just showing where our different technologies are. So the green triangles is the Goanna, the squares are Arable, the circles are autonomous pivot. So you can see that they're very spread out throughout Texas high and southern plains. So we're getting a lot of really good readings from this. And this is what we're reading. So rainfall, we do have weather stations installed on a bunch of our field sites. We also use the Texas Tech or the West Texas Mesonet, which is located, in just about every county in Texas, in our area of Texas, has at least one, if not multiple, weather stations through the West Texas weather mesonet. So that's where we're getting our rainfall, wind speeds, temperatures, all of that data from. Lindsay FieldNet, most of our producers have FieldNet installed on their pivots. At the beginning of the project, we furnished the FieldNet for several of the pivots. And so that's also bringing in some really good data for us and for the producers. And then we take records from each producer. So we give each producer a record book at the beginning of the season. And then at the end of the season, once they have harvested, gotten their yields, and gotten their prices for their crops, including their cotton seed, then we take their record books, and we're able to see what herbicides they applied, what fertilizers they applied, what kind of seed they used. Did they use Fibermax? Did they use Delta Pine? What variety of that did they use? And then we are able to put an economic analysis on all of this as well. So that's pretty unique to our project. And since we do go back 20 years, we have that sort of data for 20 years. So that's something that we're really proud of. And that economic analysis is what the producers are very interested in, because they want to know, how much am I getting out of my water? And if I don't put on that final application of water in September, is it going to cost me anything? So that's where we can really find some water savings and some money savings, is through that economic analysis. So this is I just went autonomous pivot. So this is what the grower is seeing. Whenever you log into your autonomous pivot app on your phone, you pull up your field. So this is Tulsi's. This is one of our fields. Then the blue line you see here, that is optimal soil profile fill. So that's where you want to be close to, is that right there, that blue line. Orange line is where you are. You can see that here they did an irrigation application down at the bottom, the teal line, and you can see that they had a little spike in their orange line, but they never completely filled their soil moisture profile. They never completely met that blue line. Now, why is that? Because they barely had any rainfall in the whole month of July. So they were trying to play catch up with their irrigation only. If there was a rain event in here, and you can see there are very tiny little bitty rain events in here. That's what the blue line is at the bottom. But if they would have had a rain event, then they would have reached their soil moisture profile fill level there. But this is what you see whenever you log in to Autonomous Pivot. As you can see at the top, like I said, it breaks your field into sections. And so this one has 8 sections here. And you can see where your pivot's at, which is the black line. And so say you're having to be in Lubbock for a doctor's appointment. You can pull this up on your phone, see where your pivot's at, and see if there's anything kind of quirky going on that you need to address whenever you get back. But that's what we really like about this, is that it breaks it up into sections, and it does it as a whole field reading. Again, here you can see this one's even better. And this is a half circle pivot. But you can see here where they had their irrigation event, there's obvious spikes to where they almost fill that profile or get close to it. Whenever there was an irrigation event coupled with a rain event, then they actually went past that water profile fill. And again, it goes down. Of course, this is in August. August in Texas in our area is hot. I'm sure all of you are the same. So you're seeing like incredible ET rates. And then he had another. So he is watering, as you can see, this is 3 days apart. And then this is 5 days apart. You can see in the window where he was 5 days apart, how much it went down. And then he did another irrigation event, was able to get it up to where that crop needed to be. This is what you would see on your computer screen too. So if you logged in on your computer, it looks more like this versus the first picture I showed you. This is also the unique thing about Autonomous Pivot. So it has cameras installed all down the pivot. So you are able to pull this up on your phone as well. You can see that at 7:35 a.m., that's about when the pivot went around right here. You can see in this where it says slice H, you can see that that's where the pivot was on whenever it went around and put the water down. You can see this field was planted into sorghum stubble, which is why it has in between the rows there. And this also, these cameras, whenever, like I said, if you're in Lubbock and you're at a doctor's appointment and you get a weather alert on your phone that says a hailstorm just went through Plainview, Texas, which is where your fields are, you can pull this up and see if you got hailed out or not, or what kind of hail damage you had. We also have producers use this and can tell where they have weed pressure. If the weed pressure is just in a small spot on that pivot in the middle of the pivot where you can't really see it just driving by roadside, then they also use these cameras to find places like that where they might need a spot spray. So this is very unique. We've never seen a technology with something like this on it. And our producers are starting to request autonomous pivot if we use their fields just for added assets like this. As far as what kind of irrigation applications we see on our fields, we mainly see Lisa, LIPA, and drip. Now then, we did do a study, and this was way back in 2011 to 2014, where we had one pivot span, and it had the Lisa, the PMDI. We used Dragonline. I don't know if y'all heard of that before. It's pretty neat technology. We just had some hiccups with it. And then LIPA, like I said, is what is mostly installed. Now, when they started this project in 2005, we had some furrow flood irrigation, but that's just not you. I mean, we just don't have the water to do that anymore, and it's not used in our area. So Lisa and LIPA and drip are the primary methods of irrigation in our project. This was part of that study. As you can see, this was in 2011. I don't know what 2011 was like in your neck of the woods, but in ours, it was the most drought year that we've ever experienced. So as you can see on the left here is Lisa application. You can see it never reached the full point. It just never got. LIPA, it actually did. And so the LIPA has so much better efficiency rate in our area, especially whenever it's hot and windy, like it normally is during our growing season in West Texas. But LIPA has always consistently in our project just done the best and held the best water on any field. It didn't matter the crop. It didn't matter if it was no-till, minimum till, conventional till. We saw the best results in LIPA. And drip, I will say drip works very well in our area if you have a good starting rain. It's very hard for us to get that to pre-water with a drip to get it up to the point to really get that crop established. If we have a good rain to get that crop established, and then from then on, drip performs really well as well. So what are the key findings that we have seen? And I'm sure these are nothing new to you all, and a lot of them are pretty obvious, but deep roots are important. You really want to, and cotton is king in our area, of course, but you want to stress that cotton out a little bit to make sure that it roots down good enough to find that water. You don't want to spoil that cotton crop and make it short root. You really want to stress it out a little bit so that it gets a good taproot and looks for that water down deep. Only apply enough water to refill the profile. And that's a struggle a lot of years in our area. But if you just need 1 inch to, if you're looking at your readings, And you see you only need 1 inch to meet your full point. Don't add 2. It's not going to do you any more good to add 2 versus 1 if you reach that full point. And efficiency is key. That's where drip and LIPA are key in our area just because of ET. And then irrigate as few times as possible. It's really hard on that pivot, on your tires, on everything, to keep it running fast. If you can run that pivot fairly slow and do slower applications and more of it, then that's going to be better on your crop and your equipment. And so irrigate as few times as possible, and instead of just running that thing and putting down 1 inch as fast as you can, let it be slow in doing that, and you're going to get better efficiency and be better for your pivot. And then Open ET is something new that we're using. I don't know a lot about it. This is kind of Krishna's area, but I've been reading and watching some videos on it, and it's very interesting. And a lot of you may be using this some, but this is something that we're going to be using more in the project. And then this is just a little bit about what we're doing at Texas Tech as far as water. And so we are really collaborating now together across all of our departments, because produced water in our area and a little farther south in the Permian Basin is huge right now. You're talking billions of gallons of water that need cleaned up and put somewhere. And so we're working with Shane Walker, and he's the director of the Produced Water Consortium. And then Dr. Darren Hudson, he's the dean of I don't even know his exact title, but he's the dean of research outreach or something like that now. But he's kind of taken the lead for us in developing different collaborations, and us all working together and how we can do that. Of course, Dr. Jagadish is the director of the College of Ag Water Center, and then me with the producers. So I don't do any sort of field research with the university. That's Krishna's department. I work specifically with real fields and real producers. The producers have all the say in our project. We don't go out and tell them, you need to plant this, and you need to water this many times, and you need to put down this much irrigation. It's all up to them, because we're not paying them anything, and they have all the skin in the game to say. So they farm however they feel is best for their pocketbook and their operation. We just take their data, their records, and then we, like I said, do the economic analysis and everything else with that. So I work with the producers directly in the real fields. Krishna has some of his own research, very much like what we're doing on the New Deal sites for the university. And then, like I said, we are going to be working with Shane very closely, because I think that produced water is something that we'll be seeing a lot of development in the next 5 years. So it's like I said, the amount of produced water in the Permian Basin is mind-blowing, and it needs, with the earthquakes and everything else that's going on, there needs to be some other outlet for it. And so that's something that we're excited to work with and see if agriculture could possibly be a use for that somewhere down the line. This is our outreach. And like I said, outreach is a huge part of the TAWC. Whenever we get these readings and get all this data, and then how do we relay that to the actual producers? Well, the way we have found is best is have the producers tell the story to other producers and ag consultants. So if you can talk to one ag consultant, then that's the same as talking to all the farmers that he consults with. So relaying your information to an ag consultant, we have learned, is very beneficial. So you can see here, this is actually the big picture is one of our producers who's talking there, Lloyd Arthur. It's his farm, and that's where we have an annual field day, is at his barn. And he talks, he tells us what worked and what didn't work and what technology he used the best and why he used it and how he used it. And then we go out into his fields, and then we have representatives. Oh, I'm sorry, representatives from the different technologies come out and explain how those work and how you can use them, how much they cost, and everything about those different technologies. And the producers can actually see them. And then while we're at Lloyd's barn, he has TV screens in there that he can pull up his data, his autonomous pivot or his Goanna apps on, and show the producers how they can do that themselves if they get it installed on their fields. Other things that we do as far as research, we have our other annual event is called Water College. It's in January, and we have different presenters come to it. It's at the Lubbock Civic Center, and it's our most heavily attended event of the year. And then we also have a class, a senior seminar class, where we teach just all the different jobs that are out there associated with irrigated agriculture. So you can see here, this is Bob Glott. He's an ag consultant in Plainview, Texas. And he's showing those kids in this picture the cotton root and explaining to them about how you need to make that cotton root search for water, how deep it kind of needs to be, and all that stuff. So like I said, ag consultants is something that we have learned are a huge asset to our project, and we really try to work with them. So that's about all I put together to talk to you about. Is there, I'm more than happy to ask any questions you may have. And as far as crops go, we do look mainly at cotton, grain, sorghum, corn, and then a lot of our producers plant winter wheat. Some of them take that to harvest, either as hay or seed, mostly hay, and then some of them just use it as a cover crop to plant into. And then most of our planting happens in May or June.
Hey there, this is Kipper. I have a few questions that I put in the chat. I was curious if you could talk about the economic analysis that you're doing and what you're seeing as far as financial savings. And then I was also curious if you could talk about the scale of farmers who have been using this type of technology. Like, are there small scale farmers using this, or is it mostly large scale farms that are using this?
So most of our farmers farm anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 acres. So, and that I would say is a pretty average farm size in our area. And they're all just family farms, but that's about the size that they are. And then the economic analysis. So what we've learned is where our farmers save the most money is at the end of the growing season. So it's really hard to meet that full profile in our area in June, July, August. But at the end of August and September, if they're full and they can save one or two water applications, then that's where we see a huge economic advantage, is at the end of the growing season. And another thing is, like in 2011, like I showed you earlier, it was very, very dry. We saw 9 inches of rain the whole year. And so what Lloyd Arthur showed us is he just tried to keep watering. He tried very, very hard to make a crop. And the only way he could do it was with his irrigation water, because we had no rainfall. And he ended up losing $200,000 that year just because of energy cost. It cost him so much to keep running those pivots, but he just thought, well, I'm already this far. I have to make a crop. I have to keep it going. Insurance isn't going to pay me now. And so he just kept growing, kept watering. and he was $200,000 in the hole at the end of the season. So what he learned the next time we had a drought like that was, okay, I'm just going to abandon it. If which no farmer wants to do. Every farmer wants to make a crop, but at what time is that just not economically sustainable to do that? And so I have, and that's something he has shown at this field day at his barn is those energy costs from those 2 different years that he has, and it's like I said, it's mind blowing. And then on a year where it rains and it's they don't have to run that pivot so much. It's also very substantial the amount of money that they're able to save. So that's another thing with the irrigation technology though is say it rains and it rains on Sunday and Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, you don't have to run that pivot, just eyeballing that field. It looks wet, looks good, but then it starts getting hot, the wind blows. You look out there Friday evening and you're like, man, it's dry again. I better start my pivot back up. So you start your pivot back up and start running another inch. Well, you may not actually have to do that. If your crop's already pretty established and those roots are down good enough, and you look at your autonomous pivot or your Goanna uh, on your phone or whatever, you may actually still have a full profile. It may just not look like it just by eyeballing the field, because especially depending on the soil you have. But if that's another way that we're able to save some money on and really justify the cost that goes into this autonomous pivot and go in or whatever technology you're using is if you can't see past that top layer of dirt, but there may be enough water down there to not have to turn that pivot on.
Thank you so much. And I think there's also a question on the chat.
Okay, let me I can't see the chat
Yeah,
because my
it's
screen here. Oh,
Christy's
there.
question. If you're on, Christy.
Yeah, I just
Go
was
ahead.
wondering about how you kind of determined all of your full points with all the different soil types and all of the different crops you have in your areas. Are you just using soil moisture sensors with the technologies you have, or have you been out there with a shovel, or kind of explain a little bit more with that?
Yeah, so Bob Glott, we actually used as a consultant for the project, or we just worked with him because he was already a consultant in most of our projects that we he would go out and he would take a one of the soil the probe out to the fields and see if it was accurate to what readings we were getting, because especially at the beginning of the project we didn't know how accurate all of these readings were, and so we had him follow up behind these fields and see probe them himself, and the farmers do as well. They'll go out there and probe their fields themselves and see if it's accurate. The satellite imagery and everything that's coming in is pretty specific to the field and the soil type and everything that's going into that as well. Um, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Yeah,
we
thank you.
yeah, I would if you do use any of these technologies, then I would highly recommend going behind them and probing the field yourself and seeing if it is accurate. And what we've learned is it is very accurate. Goanna has a wonderful customer relations uh, people with it. Their salesmen, their consultants, everybody are just over the top and great to work with. And so they go out in those fields. They are looking at the readings themselves on their ends. They'll, if they see something kind of strange going on, they'll call the producers and give recommendations. Autonomous pivots pretty good as well, but Goanna has actually hired people that are just very knowledgeable about this. They've worked in the industry and know what they're doing. And so the producers really trust them and their recommendations.
So, how much do some of these technologies cost to
About
producers?
1,200 a year. I think it's the autonomous pivot. 800 a year on some of them. I think if you get multiple systems on your field, then they have price breaks on those as well. But it's kind of in that range. And that's something that our producers are very frank about is it's either got to make me money or save me money or it's not worth having. And so that's something that we have to justify through the project as well. Now then we do provide the technology for the producers. Where I said we don't pay them, we don't pay them to be a part of the project, but we do provide the technology. And like I said with Goanna and uh, well, we also do soil testing on these, so we're able to give that to them as well. Soil test results and everything that we do for our own research, we provide back to the producer. So that's kind of what they get as far as compensation goes.
I was curious for Texas if you could speak a little bit. I'm from California, so I'm unaware of their like water policy. And for California, we have Sigma and like a ton of um, regulations on the water, especially irrigation, groundwater. Is that
Yeah.
true for Texas as well?
No, no. If you own the land, you own the water, and so it's we've had very little regulations on that.
Okay.
There are so it's not it's also up to your groundwater district. So Texas is broken up into groundwater districts, and but in our area those districts are ran by a board of producers. So uh, they obviously don't want to hinder their use of water, but they also know. So in the 1940s is when irrigation, mainly pivot irrigation, really boomed in the high plains, southern high plains of Texas. And you can go back into the high plains groundwater district records and you can see the massive drop in water well levels from the 1940s to the 1960s. I mean, it was like you just stuck a straw in a cup and sucked on it for, just, and so uh, they are all very aware of that. They also know whenever they kick their pivot at the beginning of the season versus the end of season, what their pressure's like. And then uh, they've all been farming for so long that they've had pivots go dry. They've had to take a full pivot of cotton down to a half pivot of cotton and a half pivot of either furrow or rain-fed crop, or they have pivots that share water. So you water one pivot one year, lay the other pivot furrow, switch it out because those two pivots are having to share all the same wells. So they're well aware of the situation they're in and they're having to be conservative of it themselves just to stay in business. But as far as the state giving any restrictions to them, then no. Now, then the state does restrict that produced water and the cleanup of it and the use of it, obviously. But that's something that I think uh, just the amount of it, and the only way they have to get rid of it is injection wells at the moment. And then the increasing amount of earthquakes where those injection well sites are is pretty alarming. And so that's something that Texas is really trying to get ahead of right now is what to do with the produced water. And if they can figure out a way to get it clean and get it transported and get it used to ag, then that will be a game changer in the Permian Basin area because like that's that Martin County area. See, go back up here to my map. But that Martin County Glasscock area is where that produced water is um, at. And like I said, that's 90% just rain-fed fields, just dryland fields. If there's a way to get those billions and billions of gallons of produced water, I think it's 25 million barrels a day or something like that of produced water in the Permian Basin. If they can get that cleaned up and used in any way, then that's a game changer in the amount of water we'll have available.
Yeah, Sam, I don't know if everyone on the call knows what produced water means in this context. If you could explain, and I'm also
Sure.
curious what how producers are reacting to that prospect.
Well, so produced water is the water that comes up with the oil. Um, so it's obviously very, very salty and just gross. And so they're trying to clean that up. And we have met with a couple of the companies, Texas Pacific and Bechtel, and there's a number of companies in this area that are cleaning that water up. And right now, the only way they have to get rid of that water that comes up, so it comes up through the oil, the pump jack or the horizontal wells, comes up with the oil, and they separate the oil and this water. And the only way they have to get rid of this very, very brackish water is to put it down an injection well. So it goes back into the earth and through an injection well. Well, that's causing major, major pressure. So you have your oil wells that are down in the earth causing pressure. You're shooting this produced water back into the earth. And so the amount of pressure going on is causing 4.8 earthquakes in this area. Not daily, but monthly, you know. So the produced water, they, like I said, it's separating from the oil. They have the produced water, this huge amount of it, and they're trying to clean it up. From the companies I've talked to, they have that water at a level that's cleaner than what we are seeing already being pumped up through a bunch of our irrigation wells. So they've done alfalfa studies with this, and this is something that Krishna's been working with Texas Pacific on. He's actually been taking the alfalfa and the soil and doing the analysis on it. But they have that water too clean to where the alfalfa is doing better whenever it's not at the cleanest amount. And so they're getting this water almost an RO level. But that's what produced water is.
And what how are producers reacting to the idea? Are they excited to have, an extra water
They are
source? Are they skeptical?
excited. What they want, and what I think makes the most sense, is these oil companies obviously own a lot of land themselves in the Permian Basin. They need those oil companies to put some of that land into production, use it on their own land for about 5 years, and then see the long-term results of it. And then after that, I think producers are going to be more accepting of it. They're already pretty accepting of it just because of they're able to see the analysis results of it, of testing that water. And then, like I said, they've been doing some small scale alfalfa and other type of crops, and so they're pretty accepting of it, but the long term effects of it is what's holding them back. We have a website. Just Google Texas Alliance for Water Conservation, and all of our yearly reports, annual reports are on there where you can see our economic results and what technologies we use. There's some fact sheets and other things on there. And then also from our water college, you can find, I think it's under our events or outreach section of our website, that you can see all the presentations made from our water colleges from this year and years past. And there's some really interesting ones that have either from hydrologists or other water ag consultants. Something in our area too is that's unique is you were talking about the scale and size of our farmers. We have one farmer that is in Hale County, and it's been a generational change in our project as well. But they're learning that they need to not scale down their whole operation, but find specialty crops. So they've installed high tunnels and are now growing lettuce and all kinds of different just garden vegetables. And then they bought a storefront on the square in Plainview, and they're selling their vegetables and meat, beef. And so that's something that I think we may see more of is diversification in our area, just producers doing that sort of thing.
I had lost service, so I'm not sure if you mentioned this already, but I was just curious to see in some of the data that you're taking, do you have any of the farmers that are trying different conservation practices that you're noting and trying to look at like water use efficiency or the ability to change soil moisture holding capacity?
Yeah, yes. So our we have different tillage practices. We have no-till, we have minimum till, we have conservation till, we have producers that do no-till for a while until their weeds get too bad, and then they have to till it up. We have organic fields. We have some organic cotton in the project. And then we have rotations where they use livestock as well. So they may do cotton, and then they do wheat, and then they run livestock on that wheat, and then they go back with cotton. And so we have all that. We have fields of cotton that are planted on 40-inch rows and 80-inch rows. So we've looked at that some. The thing that sometimes seems to skew our data, though, is weather events, obviously. So say we're looking at a 40-inch cotton on one year where it rains 18 inches, and then we look at 80-inch cotton the next year on that same field, and it only rains 14 inches. And so we try to apply the irrigation to it to match, but the overall water, what it gets as far as water, but obviously rain is just so much better than irrigation water in our area. So also, we try to start in May getting our all of our irrigation technologies installed. But there are years, and this was one of them, where we saw grain sorghum planted in July, just because they started with cotton, it got held out, and then they weren't able to get in to the fields because of rain or whatever. And then finally in July, they planted a sorghum variety that was a short season variety. So sometimes, and that was something that Krishna learned whenever he moved to Texas, was you can't just say, all right, we're going to do all this May 30th, because you never know what the weather in Texas is going to be like. But it's going to be extreme.
Out of curiosity, are you guys seeing anything with the conservation practices? Is there any shining star from what you're seeing as far as water use efficiency, something that people are doing where they're significantly reducing their amount of water?
So grain sorghum, I would say, is obvious. It doesn't use as much water, but this past year they seem to make as much money with it as cotton. And so they were able to save some water with their grain sorghum. They also didn't have to go in and plant wheat or something. They were able to just use their grain sorghum stubble to plant cotton the next year. So you're saving the cost of your wheat seed and running across again with your tractor, using that diesel and that labor to plant your wheat. So grain sorghum cotton rotation is something that I think is really kind of shining in our project right now. Also, that wheat, if they don't terminate it at just the right time, then it uses some of that moisture that cotton needs. So you have to terminate that wheat in a very small window of time and make sure you do it just right so that you're not using your next season's moisture. And the cattle's great. I will say something that our producers have learned is not every farmer is a cowman. So if you're going to incorporate livestock on your farm, then I highly recommend you kind of know what you're getting into before you do it. Not all cows are born by themselves. You have to get out there and pull a couple, and if they're going to get out, they're going to get out on a Sunday morning or sometime whenever you're not home, it seems like. So the the livestock component's great, and some of our producers love it. Some of our producers have tried it and are like, no, that's not for me. So they may lease it and somebody else come in and run stalkers or something on it, but not every farmer is cut out to be a cowboy. But I will say, not in our project, but I know in the I can't even the no-till there's some no-till type of organization. There are quite a few farmers now using sheep and goats, and that I've heard has really helped with the weed pressure if you are doing organic or a no-till rotation. Those sheep and goats will get out there and eat those weeds more so than a cow will. And so they'll plant cotton or whatever, go back in with some sort of multi-species cover crop, put goats or sheep on it, and then pull those off and go back in with another row crop.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You're
thanks for the
welcome.
presentation. Yeah, we're using, well, I'm from Utah. We're using OpenET, very good, very interesting development coming up. The beauty of it is only now it's still in Western US, and we're seeing a lot of trying to track our irrigation using that. Then I've seen Arabo is very good. Just curious. I mean, there's a lot happening in the ag space now. A lot happening in ag tech space. How do you compare Arabo and Guyana? I see autonomous people, very interesting. I'll follow up with Krishna.
Yes. Autonomous pivot. So this past growing season, I actually asked our producers if you had your pick of technologies, which technology would you like for me to put on you this year? And
Yeah.
most all of them, especially the younger producers, requested autonomous pivot.
Okay.
They really like it, and mainly because of that whole field view of it.
Yeah.
And the cameras on it. They really like both of those features.
I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Yeah.